Soryang would be interested in a mystical stone lizard. Jaegal begins to recount how, during the day, they had arrived at a remote location on the island, where a majestic waterfall cascaded down the cliffs. Among them was Jaegal's nephew, and he was the one who announced that they had finally arrived. They had reached Mount Gonga in Sichuan. His nephew, Cheon, remarked that it was exactly as their ancestors had described: the waterfall, the turtle-shaped rock, everything was identical. Furthermore, from that vantage point, they could also see the peak of Mount Gonga in the distance. Jaegal stepped closer to the water, crouching down to touch it. Feeling its icy temperature against his fingers, he commented that this water undoubtedly came from the melting of the eternal snow, as it was extremely cold. Smiling, Jaegal gave orders to his men to wait there and instructed Cheon to follow him carefully. The men obeyed, and Cheon's face lit up with excitement. Jaegal then leaped forward, crossing the river toward the waterfall. Determined not to be left behind, Cheon mirrored Jaegal's movements, closely following him. After some time they finally reached their destination. Jaegal placed his hand on a rock, waiting for Cheon to catch up. The two of them then gazed beyond a cave hidden behind the waterfall. Observing the surroundings, Jaegal remarked that, aside from the turtle-shaped rock, if they climbed along the waterfall on the cliffside, there should be an entrance to a cave near the fist-shaped stone. Still brimming with excitement, Cheon enthusiastically said that everything matched the records perfectly. Fixing his gaze on the cave entrance, Jaegal declared that he would go in first and instructed Cheon to follow closely behind him. Cheon nodded in understanding. As they stepped inside, they found the cave walls covered with various herbs. Jaegal and Cheon proceeded cautiously, mindful of any potential surprises lurking in the darkness. Upon reaching the heart of the cave, Jaegal suddenly halted, his eyes widening. He murmured that this was truly incredible. A hole in the ceiling allowed sunlight to pour in, illuminating the entire chamber. Standing still with his hands behind his back, Jaegal observed the breathtaking sight before him. Cheon, equally mesmerized, expressed his amazement, stating that such a mystical view was the last thing one would expect inside a cave. Still smiling, Jaegal commented that this was the perfect environment for spiritual herbs to thrive. Then his eyes fell upon exactly what he had been searching for: a rare spiritual herb that had absorbed the extreme yin energy over time, the 100-year snow ginseng. Cheon took a step closer and remarked that now all they had to do was exchange this snow ginseng for the dark wool flower from the Namgung clan. Jaegal nodded in agreement, adding that with this, the severed meridians of the Namgung clan's daughter should improve. Furthermore, they would obtain a 200-year-old dark wool flower in return. Stepping even closer, Jaegal reached out toward the snow ginseng, his hand emanating a faint blue aura as he prepared to collect it. However, in that very moment he sensed a strange presence. Almost instantly, something shot out from between the rocks, leaping toward him. Reacting with lightning-fast reflexes, Jaegal swiftly pulled out his fan and used it to defend himself, narrowly avoiding being struck. Having witnessed everything unfold in the blink of an eye, Cheon called out to his uncle, asking if he was all right. His voice carried concern, as it was now clear that there was more than just one creature attacking them. Amidst the flurry of movements inside the cave, Jaegal reassured Cheon that he was fine but warned him to stay on guard, as these creatures were moving with astonishing speed. Seizing an opening behind Jaegal, two of the creatures launched another attack. Sensing the danger, Jaegal quickly turned around and blocked the strikes with his fan once more. But this time he noticed something unusual. These attacks carried a freezing effect as the tip of his fan was now coated in ice. Cheon approached and asked what was happening, but Jaegal remained silent for a brief moment. Then he spoke, stating that this was a lizard. Cheon, puzzled, hesitated before asking if he had heard correctly. Jaegal confirmed, explaining that yes, it was indeed a lizard, an incredibly fast blue-scaled lizard with piercing yellow eyes and dark skin. Returning to the present moment after hearing this story, Soryang questioned whether it was truly real, as naturally occurring blue lizards were extraordinarily rare. The Great Patriarch inquired whether these lizards were venomous and if Jaegal was certain that the situation was safe. Practically drooling with excitement, Soryang assured them that everything was fine and that they could leave it to him. Soryang mentioned that lizards carried venomous chi in their eyes. However, the Great Patriarch admitted that he had no idea what Soryang was talking about but trusted him nonetheless. Observing the entire exchange and Soryang's sheer enthusiasm, it became clear just how eccentric he was when it came to this particular subject. As night fell, Jaegal stated that if he came across any new information regarding toxic creatures, he would make sure Soryang was the first to know. The following day his father-in-law returned. Calling out for his son-in-law, he sought Soryang. Still seated in the same place, Hwayin welcomed him, while Soryang asked if something had happened. Approaching him, the patriarch suddenly pinched Soryang's cheeks, asking if he was all right. Soryang, somewhat confused, responded that he was fine, while Hwayin observed the entire scene, shocked by her father's reaction. Then Soryang revealed his arms, which were covered in snake bites. He casually explained that although he had woken up after 10 days with scars all over his arms, he was in fact alive. Upon hearing this, the patriarch's expression darkened, his anger igniting against those wretched bastards from the blood cult. It was only then that the patriarch realized he had completely forgotten something. Then he turned to Hwayin and shouted, asking if she was all right. Hwayin, realizing that she had been momentarily overlooked, responded that she was fine and asked him to calm down. She reassured him once more, emphasizing that she was truly fine because Soryang and all the family members had saved her. Seated in the background, the Grand Patriarch remarked that Soryang had done something truly remarkable. He recalled that after taking down the elder, Soryang had boldly declared the words, "Your natural enemy is me." Hearing this, the Patriarch's eyes gleamed with interest, while Soryang blushed in embarrassment. Hwayin, however, corrected the statement, saying that the actual phrase had been, "I am your natural enemy." Soryang, fidgeting with his fingers in a timid manner, admitted that it happened that way because his plan had worked so well. Thanks to that, they had been able to uncover the weakness of the blood cult. Interrupting the family moment, Jae-gal called out to Cheolson, the Patriarch, stating that he was also present. The Patriarch turned to him and asked how he had been. Clasping his hands in a formal greeting, the Patriarch remarked that ever since Jae-gal had risen in rank, they had not communicated much and were now finally meeting under these circumstances. Jae-gal acknowledged this as true and expressed his regret over it. Soryang, not entirely understanding the situation, had a confused look on his face. Meanwhile, Hwayin, smiling as she adjusted her hair, explained that they had been childhood friends. Jae-gal then invited the Patriarch to take a seat, mentioning that there was much to discuss, starting with the blood cult. Turning his gaze toward the couple, Jae-gal also requested that they sit down as there were more details to go over. Sometime later, the Patriarch asked Jae-gal how the search for the secret agent was progressing. Hearing this, Soryang thought to himself that they might be talking about a spy or something similar. So, he asked what kind of secret agent they were referring to. The Patriarch stroked his chin and gave a faint smile. He then asked if Soryang remembered how the bastards from the blood cult had invaded to steal the secret manual of the venomous claw of the bloody hand. Soryang confirmed that he did and added that it seemed like they considered it to be of immense value. The Patriarch stated that this was exactly the point. He then asked Soryang how he thought their enemies had discovered that the venomous claw of the bloody hand was in the possession of the Tang Clan. This revelation left Soryang in shock. He had not even considered that possibility. Rising from his seat, slightly agitated, Soryang exclaimed that this was a huge problem. He then asked if someone from the Tang Clan could possibly have leaked information to the blood cult. This question stunned both the Patriarch and Jae-gal. Jae-gal then turned to the Patriarch and suggested that he educate his son-in-law, as being a newcomer, he was unaware of certain histories, despite having heard quite a few entertaining stories about him. The Patriarch chuckled, stroking his mustache. Meanwhile, Soryang, sweating slightly, wondered if he was being perceived as odd. Hwayin then turned to Soryang and firmly stated that secret agents could never exist within the Tang Clan. She explained that even when selecting a mere servant, they conducted thorough background checks on all direct relatives and even distant cousins. Cheolson added that only if the individual passed these strict evaluations would they bring all direct family members into the clan. He further explained that all children were raised within the Tang Clan. Under such circumstances, no one would dare betray them. Listening to this, Soryang realized that they took extremely rigorous precautions. Still processing it all, Soryang then asked who the secret agent was. Jae-gal revealed that it had been the woman who served tea. She had been discovered, and the necessary measures had already been taken. He also stated that she was a servant of the Murim Alliance and mentioned that, within the alliance, only 3 people had knowledge of this matter. At this point, the leader of the alliance must have already captured her. Meanwhile, as the situation within the Tang Clan was beginning to settle, an unexpected guest arrived at the Tang Clan's mansion. The new visitor, standing at the entrance, requested that the guard inform the Patriarch of his arrival. He stated that he had finally made it there and that running the entire way from Hebei without using mobility arts had been quite an amusing experience. Then, pounding his chest, the man introduced himself as Peng Muon and asked the guard to announce that the leader of the Peng clan had just arrived. After he arrived, a signal in the form of an arrow was sent soaring through the sky. Without wasting any time, Soryang and Hwayin immediately rushed to receive the new guests. As they ran, Soryang grew concerned and questioned Hwayin about whether it was a good idea for only the 2 of them to go. She reassured him not to worry, reminding him that the others were engaged in an important discussion. With a subtle smile, she pointed out that the young master was also the son-in-law of the Tang family and encouraged him to have a bit more confidence in himself. Upon arriving at the location, Soryang slowly opened the door, convincing himself that it was merely a guest from another clan and that there was no reason to be nervous. However, the moment his gaze landed on the newly arrived individuals, he froze in place, overwhelmed by the intimidating presence of the men standing before him. Peng Muon studied him with a slightly suspicious expression before shifting his focus elsewhere. Suddenly, both he and his men brightened as soon as they saw Lady Hwayin. Their expressions softened with joy as she formally introduced herself and greeted the head of the Peng clan. Muon commented on how much time had passed since their last meeting and admitted that he had barely recognized her, as she had been much smaller back then. Hwayin, smiling, agreed, remarking that it had already been 5 years, a considerable amount of time. As Muon observed Soryang standing beside Hwayin, his expression shifted once more, and he questioned the identity of the man accompanying her. Still feeling nervous, Soryang respectfully clasped his hands together and introduced himself as Soryang, the son-in-law of the Sichuan Tang family. For a brief moment, Muon seemed utterly perplexed by this statement. Without warning, Muon reached out and pinched Soryang's cheeks before turning to Hwayin and asking if he was truly her fiancé. She confirmed with a straightforward, yes. Even after hearing her answer, Muin remained skeptical, carefully studying Soryang's demeanor. The longer he stared, the more anxious Soryang became, his nervous sweat increasing as he struggled to maintain eye contact. Resting his hand on his chin, Muin suddenly came up with an idea. Before Soryang could react, Muin grabbed his baseball bat, seemingly wanting to verify something. Both Soryang and Hwayin turned red at the unexpected action. After a moment of silence, Muin burst into laughter and casually remarked that he had been wondering if Soryang was too young, but judging from down there, he was certainly a man. His words made Soryang's face flush an even deeper shade of red. Turning back to Hwayin, Muin praised her for finding a good partner, confidently stating that Soryang would become an incredible man in the coming years. Embarrassed, Hwayin shyly covered her face, unable to hide her blushing cheeks. As laughter filled the air and Soryang remained awkwardly speechless, one of Muin's men silently noted that the Hebei Peng clan truly had no regard for etiquette or formalities. Perhaps this was simply the leader's unique way of assessing Soryang. Deciding to roll with the situation, Soryang accepted the compliment and in his mind, acknowledged that a man recognizes another man. Muin, still amused, let out another hearty laugh and commented that Soryang was unlike the useless heirs from other famous clans. With a firm pat on Soryang's back, Muin officially introduced himself as the head of the Peng family, expressing his pleasure in meeting him. Hwayin then called out to Peng, prompting him to ask if something was wrong. She inquired whether he had truly come all the way from Hebei to the Tang clan to offer assistance and more importantly, how he had managed to arrive so quickly. At her question, Muin's demeanor turned serious once again. He asked what kind of help was needed and whether something had happened to the Tang family. However, instead of giving a direct answer, he simply reached out and ruffled Soryang's hair, which in turn irritated Hwayin slightly. Now joining the ongoing meeting with Jaegal, Muin was brought up to speed on the recent events concerning the blood cult's appearance. However, Hwayin quickly reassured him that the cult members had already been eliminated. Hearing this, Muin sighed, regretting that he hadn't arrived a little sooner. At this point, Wilson the patriarch took his turn to speak, questioning why the leader of the Peng clan had traveled all this way. Muin, slightly embarrassed, admitted that in his anger toward the blood cult, he had completely forgotten to mention the real reason for his visit. He then revealed that in truth he had come to seek the Tang family's assistance. His words piqued everyone's curiosity, and the patriarch promptly asked what kind of help he needed. Scratching his head, Muin internally complained about the unnecessary formalities, finding them a hassle. Without further ado, he suddenly shouted for her to be brought in, saying that she needed to greet her elders. One of the scar-faced men who had arrived alongside Muin immediately stepped forward and opened the door. Both Hwayin and Soryang were stunned, sharing the same thought. Muin had spoken about her needing to greet the elders, yet the person who entered was a massive brute of a man. The towering figure stood before the table and in a gruff voice, stated that she needed to come down now to properly greet the leaders of the Sichuan Tang Clan. A small voice, coming from somewhere on the man's back, sleepily muttered that it was still too early. As realization dawned upon Soryang, he was left utterly speechless, shocked that no one had noticed this presence the entire time. Slowly, something began sliding down from under the man's cloak. And before anyone could fully process what was happening, a tiny girl, sucking on a lollipop, emerged before them. The room fell into stunned silence as everyone at the table stared at the child, unsure of how to react. Calmly, the little girl clasped her hands together in a respectful greeting and introduced herself as Peng Ying of the Peng family. Muin pulls the little girl close and states that she is his daughter. Soryang and Hwayin watch from the background, completely frozen in shock. Both of them, utterly astonished, can only think that this must be some kind of genetic miracle because she is incredibly adorable. Meanwhile, Muin proudly boasts that they look very much alike. Now gently stroking his daughter's head, Muin explains that this child is the reason he came to the Tang family to ask for help. While she calmly nibbles on a biscuit, he continues, stating that she has been feeling somewhat unwell and asks if the Tang clan could take a look at her. Upon hearing this, both the patriarch and Soryang exchange uncertain glances, questioning what kind of illness it could be. Something then catches Soryang's attention. When he looks at her closely, he notices a faint aura surrounding the little girl as she continues to eat biscuit after biscuit with a calm expression. Time passes and now night has fallen. Soryang lies in bed, surrounded by his centipedes, deep in thought. After hearing about and analyzing Ying's symptoms, they were still unable to determine the exact cause. As he absent-mindedly pinches the cheek of one of his tiny centipedes, he recalls Muin's explanation regarding his daughter's condition. Muin had described how, at times, she suddenly becomes short of breath, and large red blotches appear all over her body. In severe cases she even loses consciousness. However, after some time she regains consciousness as if nothing had happened, and no one has been able to figure out why. Muin also explained that he had already tried everything to uncover the cause. He had even sought out disciples of Yaxian, but all of them insisted that the child was perfectly healthy. There was even one occasion when a disciple suggested it might be poisoning. Muin had nearly beaten him up on the spot. Shaking his head, Muin had firmly stated that such a thing was impossible, as there was no one in his family capable of doing such a thing. The patriarch then pointed out that if it truly were poisoning, there could be an internal issue within the Peng family. However, Muin confidently reassured him that no member of the Peng family would ever commit such an act. Scratching his head, Muwen sighed and said it was better not to dwell on it too much, as he didn't want to start suspecting his own family. Jae-gal then intervened, saying that jumping to conclusions would not help since poisoning is not always caused by another person. Looking at the little girl, the patriarch decided that they would provide an empty courtyard house where she could stay for some time, allowing them to observe her condition closely. After all, it was essential to confirm whether this was truly poisoning or something entirely different. Muwen, feeling relieved, expressed his gratitude to the patriarch, acknowledging that from now on, they would be under the Tang clan's care for a while. Lying in bed, Soryong could only think that what was affecting the little girl might be juvenile diabetes since sugar seemed to be accumulating rapidly within her body. Sitting up, he tried to recall whether red blotches were a symptom of childhood diabetes, but he concluded that the best way to know was if more prominent symptoms appeared. At that very moment, someone knocked on Soryong's door. A voice called out, addressing him as young master, and informing him that a serious problem had arisen. Without hesitation, Soryong quickly opened the door and demanded to know what had happened this time. The woman before him wasted no time in explaining. The young lady of the Tang clan had just collapsed. In the dead of night, Soryong sprinted toward the scene as everyone rushed to verify what had happened. Upon arriving, he saw Muwen crouched down, holding the unconscious girl in his arms, his expression filled with worry. He overheard Muwen explaining that she had been sitting in the pavilion when she suddenly started coughing and then collapsed without warning. The patriarch, analyzing the situation, commented that since she had collapsed here as well, it meant there were no spies within the Tang family. As soon as he said this, he noticed Muwen's face twist with anger and asked him what was wrong. Without a moment's hesitation, Muwen delivered a brutal punch to his own face with all his strength. The impact was so powerful that one of his teeth went flying far into the distance. Now grinning, toothless, Muwen apologized, admitting that despite what he had previously said, he had not been able to forgive himself for even briefly suspecting his own family. His men, overwhelmed with admiration, began to weep proudly. Muwen, still holding his daughter, continued, saying that if Ing had collapsed here as well, then the cause must be something else entirely. The other men of the Tang family, moved by their leader's actions, followed suit, delivering fierce punches to their own faces and shouting apologies. They lamented their failure, insisting that despite being by her side, they had not been able to prevent the young lady from collapsing, branding it as their own disgrace. The patriarch, watching this bizarre display, simply sighed and urged them all to calm down. As yet another tooth soared through the air, Hwayin placed a hand on Soryong's shoulder and quietly asked him what they should do now. Soryong responded with determination, stating that there was only one way. In the background, Soryong suddenly raised his voice, calling for everyone's attention and urging them to remain calm above all else. He then confidently announced that there was a method to uncover the cause of her symptoms and, at the same time, prove everyone's innocence. Both the patriarch and Muwen immediately turned to him, asking what this method was. With deliberate steps, Soryong slowly approached Muwen and the unconscious young lady, lowering himself to her level. The entire room fell into an uneasy silence, every person anxiously waiting for his next words. With a serious expression, Soryong finally declared that the first step was to remove all of the young lady's clothing. The room was instantly filled with shock. Hwayin and the patriarch were left completely speechless, their faces frozen in sheer disbelief at the audacity of his statement. Meanwhile, Muwen's expression twisted into pure rage as he struggled to comprehend Soryong's intentions in attempting to undress his daughter.
Hit the bell icon and like the video. Thank you.